Hey friends, it's Jen Bengal here from Out of This World Literacy, and I'm excited to dive right into how I start my poetry reading workshop unit. Poetry is one of my favorite skills to teach. I love helping my students understand poetry as readers and then also diving into understanding poetry as writers. There are a great number of reasons why poetry is such a great thing to teach to our students. One, it supports the engagement of emotions. We can really make connections to the poems we're reading and the poems we're creating with our emotions as well. It evokes sensory images, so you can talk about all of that deeper meaning thinking. It helps students practice rereading because poems are often short. They have a good rhythm to them, they're fun. So you get to incorporate all that rhyming and rhythm a lot of times with poetry. And there's not a lot of text, so you can go really deep with comprehension with fewer words. So if you're working with struggling readers or struggling writers, poetry is a great way to practice skills without having so much content. A couple other great reader reasons is it helps readers really anticipate the text because again, they can feel that rhythm and that flow with poetry so much easier so they can practice their reading fluency. There's a lot of figurative language in poetry, which is a great thing to teach at the same time as trying poetry out as writers. You might be teaching some figurative language skills as readers. It's great for teaching inferring. It's perfect for author's purpose because we want to know why the poets are writing what they're writing. And it's a great platform for students to write creatively what they really enjoy and what they're passionate about. So let me show you how I set up my poetry unit. I start by gathering a collection of poetry, and I create poetry journals. And I'll show you how I make the journals in just a second. But let me show you, these are some of my favorite poetry books. And I'm also giving you a free download. In the description, you'll see a link that has a list of poetry books that I love that maybe you can use with your students. I recommend gathering at least one book per student. So if you have 20 books for your poetry unit, you're going to want, if you have 20 students, I'm sorry, you're going to want 20 books. Utilize your classroom, utilize the librarian in your school, ask he or she to pull poetry collections for you from the school library. Go check some out at the public library, find some in the dollar bins at the dollar price bookstores. Just gather as many as you can. For the journals, what I do is I create a poetry journal for each of my students that we use during our unit. It's not really big. I like to use cardstock, and the covers are just cardstock colored paper with a cover. I also use about 20 pages of cardstock. I like to use cardstock because the students are going to be using pens, markers, things that might bleed through on thinner paper. And I want their work to really be uh, clear and easy to read in their journals. So we just use cardstock. And then I just bound these with like a spiral binder, but you can staple them or you can use a ring to however you want to connect them together or give them all binders, whatever you want to do. But about 20 pages is really all you need. So, this is the lesson I use in the Reader's Workshop to start the reading poetry unit. It says readers can identify poetry and explain why authors write in poetic form so that they can appreciate the art form of poetry. And this is the lesson that I'll write on my anchor chart, whether on paper or on a Promethean board or a smart board. And this is our mini lesson that we do in our reading workshop when we start our poetry unit. I always like to have a so that in my mini lesson statements because I want to build purpose and understanding. I always like to make sure the students know they understand why I'm asking them to do the things that I'm asking them to do. So building that rationale in. And then we come up with a definition of what poetry is. You can use this as a guide. It's in the free download with the link in the description. And you could also come up with your own definition of poetry with your class. The one we came up with was poetry is a type of creative writing that tries to help readers use their imaginations and feel emotions. It is often short and fun to read. And then what we do is we make a list of all the things that we know about poetry and invite your students to help you with this. You might share a few first and then have them turn and talk with a partner and collect their ideas together as a group and write down all the things that you can say that you know about poetry. So this is your class anchor chart at the start of your reading workshop with poetry. Then, when you're transitioning them into independent time, show them all the books you've gathered that are poetry collections and lay them all out on the floor and tell them that today, during their reading time, they're going to go back to their desk and they're going to read poetry. So they get to pick whatever books they'd want to read. I like to have more than my students are. So if I have 20 students, I might try and find 30 books, but definitely you obviously need at least one for each student. So I just kind of call them over in groups to pick a book and go start reading. And then I make sure that they spend time enjoying that reading independently. And then the last few minutes, I'll give them a page like this, and I want them to explain what they learned about poetry as they were reading. So be thinking about what we did in the class, how we talked about what we understand about poetry. What are some new things now that you've read a few poems that you can say and understand? So you can use a think mark like this, or you can use a whole page. And they may glue this into their reader's notebook as well as a learning tool to keep forever. At the end of the workshop, they'll all come together and we'll share. First, the kids will turn and talk so everyone has a chance to share. They'll turn and talk with a partner what they wrote on their response form after they read some poetry. And then we'll add any new ideas to the class anchor chart at the end of our share, which is usually about 5 minutes or so. Now, I do have a whole poetry unit for you that's based in small group, and it covers 10 skills in this bundle. There's an in-class version or there's a digital version as well. You can check that out if you go to poetryteach.com. It's super cool. It's got Google Drive. It's got all kinds of different custom art, and every piece of teaching instruction is done for you. So that mini lesson is there. Everything like that is all laid out. And there's also student pages that they can respond to each of the poems as well. Different types of poems, different skills, different figurative language in there as well. So you can check that out. I also have a month-long reading and writing poetry unit. Now, this covers 20 days of reading and 20 days of writing workshop. It's for grades 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, if you teach in multiple grades, you really only need one unit because the only difference in the units are the mentor texts that are included. So there's mentor poems in each grade level that look a little bit different, but all the other stuff is the same. So you can use these when you have kids work in their independent time. They can read these as well. But you can see that creating a heart map, this is a lesson in the writing portion of the unit. It has everything you need. It has the mini lesson at the top. It has what to do before the lesson. It even has teacher suggested language in red for you to how you introduce it. It gives you the sample anchor chart and all the steps of the workshop all the way through the share for you. So all the lessons are done. It also includes for every reading lesson, all 20 reading lessons, it includes a bookmark form for them to respond in written form. And it also includes graphic organizers for them to respond to. There's also revising and editing checklists for their writing portion, as well as grading rubrics for the writing portion of the poetry unit. So that's it. That's what I have for you. And I hope you can take advantage of some of those resources. Also, I wanted to give you these pages today for free in the download so you can grab all of my notes on what I just went over, as well as that anchor chart I showed you for the first day of the reading workshop in poetry and the list of books that I love. I hope this lesson has helped you and get started with your reading poetry. To see more, go ahead and check out the link and you'll be able to get lots of other ideas for teaching poetry. Thank you so much and have a great day. Happy teaching. Bye.